Hey everybody, welcome to Module 5, Videography. So we have Module 5, I'll be opening up after I post this video. Right now there are going to be three things posted in there. Video Basics, which this video will be at the top of, the Knock Knock Joke, and the Montage Assignment. So I'm going to go over this part first, then we'll go into the two assignments afterwards. So let's look at Video Basics. So just like photography, when we start talking about that, when we talk about aperture, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, there's no particular order that those need to go in. They all combine together for the same thing. Same thing with video. There's a lot of stuff I'm going to go over. There's no particular order that you need to go in every time, but you do need to think about all these things together. So the first thing we want to talk about is aspect ratio. So you can see here, aspect ratio is the ratio of the width to the height of an image. So that's where you hear the things like 16 by 9, 4 by 3, 21 by 9. You can see those are my examples right here. So 4 by 3 was your classic TV dimensions. 16 by 9 is our traditional widescreen that we have at home these days on our TV. Your computer screen might be a 16 by 10, something like that. They come in different ratios. Cinema has a wide range of ratios. 21 by 9 is a common one, but you can have ones that are even wider than that. So when I say ratio, you see there's 16 units of measurement by 9 units of measurement. So it could be 16 inches by 9 inches, 16 feet by 9 feet. That's how we measure our aspect ratio. So your aspect ratio is really going to be determined based on the camera you're using. If you want to do cinescope, you need a high-end cinema camera that is capable of doing that, along with the lenses and things like that. With the cameras that we have in-house and what you might have access to at home, widescreen 16 by 9 is what you're going to be using. Same if you take your phone and you take your phone, oops, here's my phone over here, vertically, this is good for TikTok and Instagram, but if you want to just rotate it this way, now you have true cinema or TV aspect ratio for using your phone. Now our next area is resolution. So the resolution is the number of pixels in an image. And how do we determine those pixels? Well, we do some math. We do our calculations. So even combining with our aspect ratio up here, our 4 by 3 standard def is a pixels of 720 pixels by 480 pixels. When we take a look at our high definition, that's where we hear our 1920 by 1080, which is a very common thing you might hear. So 1920, 1920 pixels this way by 1080 pixels this way. Times those together, and that's how many pixels you have on the screen. Or we go to ultra high def or 4K. So here's a little comparison chart of those items. So again, your standard definition, this is how many pixels are in the image. And as we get into high def and full HD, and then get all the way to 4K, which is 3,840 pixels by 2,160 pixels, this is where we have our 4K resolution. You can see how many more pixels it has than just regular HD, which is just about double, or actually a little bit more than double in size. And what this means is that's how much sharper your image and how much clearer your image can be, because you have that much more video information to edit with. So even if I'm going to output later on in HD for whatever reason, I still want to shoot in the highest format my camera can handle. As long as I have enough memory card space and storage to be able to record long enough at the highest resolution, that's what I want to record at. I always want to have that highest resolution for my editing, and then if I need to make it smaller for whatever video source it's going to, I can always downsize it in the export, but at least I have more information to edit with. And also I can punch in or digitally zoom in post-production if I need to crop something out. So by recording in 4K, I have a lot more versatility. And of course now there's cameras that can shoot in 6K and 8K, so the Ks are just going to keep going up with a higher and higher resolution as we go on. Really, what you become limited to is the computing process of your actual computer you edit on. Some computers aren't going to be able to handle the higher resolution, or your hard drive's not going to be able to handle it, so you do have some limitations based on that. But any computer you're using here at school should be able to handle the 4K. It also comes down to the hard drive you have connected to it. So at the beginning of the semester, when you purchased a hard drive for class, if you purchased a solid state hard drive, chances are you have a hard drive that can handle editing 4K. If you don't have a solid state hard drive, it might not be fast enough, meaning the connection between the computer and the hard drive doesn't transmit information fast enough for you to be able to edit 4K smoothly on your computer. And you also find different editing softwares work a little differently as well. I actually find DaVinci Resolve by Blackmagic works a little bit better as handling high definition video files that I record than Adobe Premiere Pro does, but they both work really well. So I also want to talk about frame rate, or the frequency at which frames in a television, picture, film, or video sequence are displayed. So that's how many individual pictures you see within that 60 seconds. So remember, video is nothing more than a lot of little pictures seen sequentially, and our brain puts them together. In the days of shooting on film and projecting with film, you're looking at individual pictures that just go by rapidly with a shutter in between that puts black on the screen, and all we see is those images, and our brain puts those together. Now with digital video, it's the same thing. It's still taking a lot of little pictures, and we're just playing the pictures back sequentially. So here you have visual representation of what that looks like. This is 60 frames per second, 30 frames per second, 24 frames, and 12 frames per second. And you can see how much information we have here versus here versus here versus a lot less information here. So ideally, you can think of the more frames you have per second, the more visual information you're going to see. Now there is a downside to that. I actually find videos with higher frame rates. For instance, Peter Jackson, when he released The Hobbit, made a 48 frame rate version, which I didn't think looked as good as the 24 frame rate version. Just because even you have the ability to do it doesn't always mean it's going to look good. A lot of times video games can shoot in really high frame rates and that looks really good, but when watching cinema or TV, the higher frame rate doesn't always pay off that way. Now again, recording in that gives me a lot of versatility. Now American TV is shot at 30 frame rates, or actually technically it's 29.95 if you want to get technical, or 29.97 depending on the camera and the system you're using. So when you're watching TV at home, you're seeing approximately 30 frames per second. Cinema is usually shot around 24 frames per second, or really 23.97. The math works that way, don't ask me why. But for common nomenclature, this is what we'll talk about. But you might see camera might say 23.97 or 29.97 instead of actually just saying 30. So the cinema look, we actually see less frames per second, but it has a different kind of visual quality to it that some people enjoy more than the higher frame rates. Now with the benefit of shooting in the higher frame rate, even if I want to export at 24, I might shoot at 48. Or if I want to export at 30, I still might shoot at 60. And the reason for that is it gives me more versatility in my post-production process. If I want to take something I shot in 30 frames per second and slow it down in post-production, you're going to start seeing motion blur as I slow it down. Versus if I shoot it at 60 frames per second, I can slow it down by half without losing any visual quality because I've shot at double the frame rate I'm going to export. So I can divide it by half and still have the same quality. So whenever you see those super slow-mo shots, they're shooting at a much higher frame rate and then slowing down the film in post-production so that way you get that crisp, clean image. So for this class, you're going to use your camera and you can really choose, experiment with it how you want to do it between the 24, 30, or 60 frame rate per second. Because that's what most of your cameras that you have access to, or the cameras we have in school, are going to shoot out of the box. Now, a rule for your shutter speed when it comes to frame rate. The rule is shooting with a DSLR or mirrorless camera is that your shutter speed should be double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 1/50th of a second, or some cameras actually do 1/48th. If you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you should have a shutter speed of 1/60th. Now, if you're shooting in a bright condition, you're going to say, well, I can't get my image dark enough with the visual quality that I want. And I'm going to say, yeah, I know. You're going to have to increase your shutter speed beyond what I told you the golden rule is. Because there's a lot of other factors that go into this rule, is having the proper filters to put on lenses. So if you're shooting cinema and you need to keep it at the right shutter speed according to the frame rate, you could put a neutral density filter on top of your lens that would knock down the brightness of the sun for you, so that way you have the proper exposure without having to adjust other things for it or increasing your shutter speed too high. But for your purposes, you're probably going to just increase your shutter speed. But you don't want to go below those shutter speeds. That is a definite rule. If you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you do not want to go below 1/50th. If you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you're not going to want to go below 1/60th of a second for shutter speed. The main reason for this is if you do, you're going to start to see a lot of motion blur. And it's just going to be a very blurry image, and it's not going to be a very high quality. Because when we talk about shutter speed and stabilization before, if you're hand holding it versus using a tripod or a monopod or whatever it is, you're going to have shakiness in the video, blurriness in the video. So your baseline at 24 frames per second is 1/50th. Your baseline at 30 frames per second is 1/60th. You do not want to go below those shutter speeds. So when we talk about cameras and doing video, when you're doing photos, you can hold your camera, take the picture, you have image stabilization in the lens, it's going to look fine. When you're doing video, you have to hold the camera there for a while, and you can get shaky. So having something to stabilize it with is always going to be something that's key. Now if you sign a camera out from school here, you have one of these monopods. You see it on the screen. Here it is right in front of me, or tripods, I mean. This is a little tabletop tripod that you can put on your desk. This little button here, you push it in, you can adjust the ball head on top here to level out your camera. You can put this on top of something else. It's just an easy way to stabilize your camera. And also if you collapse it like this, it's also a nice handle to be able to move it around. Now, of course, a video tripod would give you a lot more stabilization, a little taller, if you had one of those. You also have a monopod. These are great tools for what I consider run and gun situations, or you just need something to take the weight off of a head camera for you. I use these when I shoot weddings. For my camera that I'm using around, I have it on a monopod, actually combined with the image below, which is a gimbal. So the gimbal is a little motorized stabilizer. You put your camera on it, you balance it, and then when you turn it on, it's going to balance it for you. So you can move the camera all around, you move your hands, and the camera's going to stay pointing in the right direction. There's, of course, limitations to it. But when I combine this gimbal on top of this monopod, now I have a gimbal on top of a pole that I can move around even higher, and does a lot of cool features with that. Now, of course, you can always handhold your camera as well. But if you're going to handhold it, you don't want to be holding it out from your body like this, because your arms are going to get shaky and wobbly and all that stuff. So if you have to handhold, I always use my hand as a base to put the camera on top of. And then my other hand is working the controls and stabilizing this way. Put the camera strap around my neck. There's another point of contact to keep it stable. And my elbows, you might not be able to see in the video, but my elbows are against the sides of my abdomen here as a stabilization. So I'm making a couple points of contact with my body to stabilize it. That's good for short-term shooting. I wouldn't be doing that for long-term, but it's a great way to, if I just need to run and gun, get something real quick, I can stabilize with my body and be able to record that video. So let's talk about some camera terms real quick, because these are going to come up in the assignment as well. So very common video terms. First of all, pan. So pan just means taking a camera and it's rotating on the center axis left or right. So pan left or pan right. Pan left, pan right. And it's always from the perspective of the videographer. Not from the talent, but from the videographer. So pan left, pan right. And then tilt is up or down. Now, you're not moving the camera like this or anything. You're just tilting up, tilting down. And then zoom is actually with the lens. So with these cameras, there's a little zoom in, zoom out button. And you'll notice that a lot of cameras, they don't say zoom in, zoom out. They say T or W on the top here where the zoom control is. That's for tight or wide. So telephoto, move it zooming in, or a wide shot zooming out. And then tracking, which we're going to talk about more when we talk about the montage assignment. But tracking is to follow along with the camera. So the camera is basically parallel with the subject, and as the subject moves, the camera moves along with that person or that subject. Now here's a video about the 180-degree rule. I want you to watch this after you watch this video. So go back and watch this video. I'm going to talk about it here below, but it's also a great illustration of how that rule works. So here we have a setup for a conversation. And this is, you're going to be doing this with the knock-knock joke assignment. So single camera, you see there's 3 cameras, but those are actually just different positions. Don't think of those as actual different cameras, although they could be if we were doing a sitcom, but we're going to be doing single camera shooting for your assignment. So think of these as individual cameras. We have 2 subjects, one on the left, one on the right. And in our establishing shot, our 2 shot, from the center here, we can see both individuals. She's on the left, he's on the right. Now, with the 180-degree rule, we want to make sure that she always stays on the left, he always stays on the right. And we can see there is this dotted line here. This is our 180-degree line. It's also called our line of action. So right now, this line is established because when we put those two people there facing each other and we put this camera here, we created that invisible line there. And that line is going to stay unless we do something to move it. So now in position 2, we are doing an OTS, or an over-the-shoulder shot. So this camera is actually looking over her shoulder. You can see here in the frame, it's looking over her shoulder and at his face. This gives us perspective, so we know that she's still there, and we're looking at him. And then in position 3, we're doing the opposite. So we're doing the reverse shot over his shoulder, looking at her face. All these cameras are staying on this side. Now you'll see what happens if we do this up here and we go across the 180 line. She ends up on the wrong side of the frame. Because remember, we established it down here. He's on the right side, she's on the left side. He should always be on the right. She should always be on the left. And if they flop, then we've made a mistake. And this creates disorientation. Of course, there's always times to break that rules for script writing purposes or whatnot, for setting up certain things. But in typical conversation, we want to keep going back and forth between these two. It's also great because when we do this, one, it gives us a lot of different angles. But when we're shooting film and we're looking at this person, we don't have to use exactly what she's saying there. We can always fill in with other dialogue that matches better. It gives us more freedom for editing. So we put in the dialogue we hear from him live on this shot, but maybe what she says in this shot isn't great dialogue, but what she said on this one is, so we actually insert this audio into this shot in our editing. And that gets a little more complicated, but it gives us a lot more versatility when our editing happens. You also see this as the standard 3 camera setup for sitcoms. Any sitcom you ever watch is going to follow this rule where you have 3 cameras and you have the line of action. Now you can move this, if he starts to move this way, then the line of action actually moves in this direction, and now you can start moving the cameras. Or if you want to cross over, if in a live shot you move this camera across the line, then you've established a new line of action. So there are ways to move it and change it, but once you establish it, you need to follow it until it changes. So down here below are some more helpful videos. This is a great video about 6 rules of video composition. And this is a great video about 6 ways of holding a camera for slow shutter speed. So this will talk about, again, some more of those techniques. You can see he's actually doing exactly what I was talking about, holding the camera with one hand underneath, one on the side, arms in tight to hold that camera for stabilization. I'm not going to go through all these right here, but these are great review. So glossary of terms. Some of these will actually come up in some of the assignments. So come back, look at these as well. These are all great just terms to know for videography if you're ever going to be doing video work. So now let's take a look at the 2 assignments for this. The first one is called the knock knock joke. In the knock knock joke assignment, you're going to be using the elements we just talked about in the 180-degree rule. So you're going to be shooting with a single camera, and for this you're going to need a couple friends or family members or unwilling volunteers to perform for you. And they're just going to do a knock knock joke. I made it's something easy. You can find a knock knock joke online, search for something as long as it's not inappropriate, and you're going to have them. So what you're going to need a camera, you're going to need 2 actors, and a joke. Those are the things that you need. And also you're going to need a setting. So you're going to need a location to do this. So the first thing you want to do is shoot an exterior of the location you're using as an establishing shot. You see this all the time with movies and sitcoms, where you see the outside of the building first before we see the conversation inside. I know that people are rewatching Friends right now. Anytime you go to Central Perk, you see the establishing shot of Central Perk first from outside, then you go inside to the conversation. So you want to start with that establishing shot. You're going to record that. Now, in great Hollywood terms, it doesn't have to be the same building. If you ever watch any sitcoms, they do a lot of establishing shots of houses on real streets, and then go into studios that are nowhere near the actual location of the establishing shot. So there's always some fun with that in movie magic. But you want to establish that location and give us that idea that's where it's happening. Now you want to arrange your two actors so they're going to face each other. So you're going to actor 1, actor 2 facing each other to say the joke. Now while they're in angle 1, just like we saw in the picture, you want them to stand far enough back to be able to see both actors in the shot. So you want to stand far enough back. So you're going to physically move yourself back, or have your camera zoomed out all the way as well, so you can see everybody in the shot. So this is our 2 shot. We see 2 people. It's called a 2 shot. And then have them perform the joke multiple times. So have them do the dialogue back and forth. You want to do at least 3 takes. I always recommend doing more, but at least 3. That's your baseline. And make sure that between each line, they don't say the next line right away. You want to have a little bit of a half a second pause. That's going to be for you to edit with. If they're right on top of each other, it's going to be hard to find edit points. If they give pauses, then you have spaces to edit. Now you can always tighten up those spaces in post-production and get rid of those spaces, but you can't add them if you don't have a place to cut. And now for angle 2, you're going to move to one side and look over that actor's shoulder at the other person's face, just like we saw back in that image for the 180 rule. Again, have them do the joke again, then move to the other side and do the joke again. So you're going to do the reverse angle over the other actor's shoulder to do the joke a 3rd time. Again, do at least 3 takes, maybe more. 3 good takes, by the way. When I say takes, if a take stops halfway through because they messed up the joke, that doesn't count as a take. I want 3 good, solid takes of each angle where they don't mess up. So now you should have at least 3 good takes for every angle that you can edit with. So once you've recorded all that, you're going to then, on your hard drive, create a folder for the project, and then take all the video files from your SD card. You're going to take your SD card out of your camera, put it in your computer, and transfer all your video files to your hard drive. And now here, for the rest of it, you're going to follow this demo instruction. I walk through the whole process of recording it. This is a demo we recorded live in class a couple years ago, and then we edited it live in class. So the only difference with this one, it's I think 2 versions behind in Premiere Pro, but all the tools you're going to be using it for are basically exactly the same. So it's not going to be an issue with that. So follow this video for editing your knock knock joke to see how the process works within Adobe Premiere Pro. And then also down here, you can see how that comes together. Now let's look at the montage. So first, I'm going to go to the end of this actually, because we should talk about what a montage is. So there's a lot of different kinds of montages, and down here, way down here, I have some videos about montage examples. So please, before you do your montages, stop and watch these videos. This is a great video specifically talking about the Soviet montage. And then we have some, great classic Rockies montage scene, Team America montage, and one of the Soviet montages from the battleship Potemkin that you probably are going to talk about in some class later on as well. And then these helpful videos are other tutorial videos about how to do walking shots, how to do close-up faces, all different kinds of shots we're going to be doing within this video project. So again, go through and watch these videos as well. And then these are come up to my instructional videos. So this particular kind of montage, we are going to be doing a rhythmic montage. Means we're going to be editing to the beat of the music. So for the montage, first of all, record all of this outside. And you can also do the knock knock joke outside if you want to as well. But for the montage, definitely do outside because you're going to need the scenery, you're going to need the space, and there's much better lighting outside. You can see here, this is your shot list right here. Required shots for this. You must have all of these shots, all 6 of these shots, to get full credit for this assignment. So first one, panning shot of scenery at sunset or sunrise. So that means outside, a scenic shot, fields, mountains, whatever it is, panning from one side to the other, left, right, right, left, and just seeing that whole thing. So just do a nice slow panning shot for yourself. Keep a consistent speed for the whole thing. You don't want to go one speed and rush at the end, or rush and slow down because you realize you're going too fast. Keep a consistent speed the whole time. Next, you're going to need a long shot of a person walking toward the camera. That means they're going to be at least 50 feet, not 100 feet away from you, walking towards you. And record that for a while. Every shot you should be recording 10 to 20 seconds at least of the video. You want to record more video than less video. Next thing is a medium shot of a person walking through the frame. So when I say medium shot, that means, it doesn't have to be the full body. It could be waist up. That's a medium shot of them walking through the frame. So they're going to be walking through left, right, right, left. You have the frame of your video. They're going to start off one side and walk through that frame and exit off the other side. So that when that clip comes in, when you're editing, they're not going to be visible in the scene right away. They're going to come into the frame and exit the frame. A close-up of a person's face. Close shot, just the face. Be creative with how you want to do it. A tracking shot of a person walking. So that person's walking and you're walking alongside of them, keeping the same pace as they walk. And finally, a worm's eye view of a person walking away from the camera as a final shot. So that's going to be, when I say worm's eye view, I mean that camera is on the ground. Tilt it up a little bit, because if you have it perpendicular to the ground, parallel to the ground, I should say, half the frame is going to be grass or dirt or whatever. So put it on the ground, then tilt it up just a little bit. Maybe put something on the front edge of the camera just to keep it tilted up, or hold it yourself. And then the person's going to start from walking behind the camera and walking past it. Whenever you're doing movement shots, when you have someone walking in a frame, have them walk before the motion's supposed to start. Because it never looks good to see the motion start on camera. If a person starts walking when they hear action, it looks a little weird. If the camera's already rolling and they start going and you edit in as they're walking, that looks more natural. That's the illusion. It makes it look like we're just observing action that's happening without it being staged for us. So this should always be your first shot. This should always be the last shot. These 4 shots, you can move them in any order you want. That's your creativity. That's your license. How you shoot them, the angle you shoot them from. Be creative with it. Have fun with it. Just always make sure you have good composition. Always have good exposure and color balance. And make sure you white balance your cameras. Make sure you have the proper exposure. Make sure it's not too dark or too bright. And make sure that you compose it correctly. Remember your rule of thirds that we talked about in the photography section. Review that video if you need to, but keep those rule of thirds in check while you're doing this. This video I shot in 2020, right when the pandemic started, as this class had to go home at that time. So I shot this outside of the Martiri Center here, and this is basically, I walk through every single shot with you. So I shot this on my phone, because that's what students had access at the time, but I walk through the close-up, the tracking, all those things. I walk through that with this video so you can get an idea of how that should look. And then this video right here is the actual editing process. So go through, watch this. This is the how to edit this video to the music. Speaking of music, if you go back up here, I actually dropped in this royalty-free music link here. This brings you to a website called Bensound. They have a lot of free, royalty-free music, which means you have the right to use it. You can't just use any music you want on a video, because people own the copyright to that. It's breaking the law. You're going to put that up on YouTube, you're going to get a copyright claim on it. You use something from here, you shouldn't get that. And the only thing you need to do is in your comments on YouTube for this, or your details, just give credit to bensound.com for where you got the music from. That's the only thing they ask for you. There are also paid music on there as well, but you're going to use the free stuff. So that's my example of how to shoot the videos. This is how to actually edit it. And here is an example of what it looks like when it's done. And here's another example featuring Batman that I did last year as well. Again, here's all your helpful videos, and here's your videos about montage. So those are the 2 assignments you're going to be doing for the week. Your Knock Knock Joke and your montage video. And please review all those extra videos I put up there. They're there to help educate you and give you more resources for shooting these videos. They're definitely worth a watch. If you have any questions, again, reach out to me or one of the tutors for the class. I'd be happy to help you, or one of the tutors happy to set up a time to work with things for you. They've all done these assignments in the past. They know exactly how these things are supposed to work, and they can help you with them. So that's it for now. Have fun on videography, and I can't wait to see your videos.